back. We are in part 2 of a multi-part series on modeling a data strategy. In our last part 1, we kicked off the series, and we're probably going to have about 7. Still working on it. We'll see how long each one of them takes. So I want to get it done as quickly as possible because we have a lot more exciting stuff to get to in 2025. So in this part, we're going to take our project, our fictitious project around our fictitious company called OurCo, and release 1. And we're going to use this template, which you learned before, so that we don't have to restart every time we go into a project, and get into release 2. So as we move into release 2, you can see it's empty for the most part. We don't have our stakeholders assigned yet, and we're going to be talking about getting into requirements and making sure that we have everything necessary to get started on a productive release. So let's get started. So the first thing that you need to do is understand the current mode of operations, or the as is, for the shop or company that you're working with. And this includes methods and procedures, as well as system and software. So it's difficult to understand where to go if you don't understand where you're coming from, right? You go into Google Maps and you want to go somewhere. What's the first thing you do? You put in where you are, right? And then you put where you want to be. So that's the very first thing that you need to accomplish, whether people like it or not. So as a solution architect, when I come in, I ask for the current building blocks that we're dealing with right now, and then this helps us understand where we're going to go. And since we're focused on data strategy, I'll bring in a legend here, and it automatically highlights everything that we're going to be focused on from a data strategy perspective. And if you go to layouts and you turn on filtering, and we're going to go down to phase right here, and let's put in release 1. And the convention they're using is R1. And you can see when you're filtering, it's highlighting everything they're focused on so far in this release, while they need to consider what may be release 2. And so if we go to release 2, you can see that we're focused primarily on the data supply, machine learning, and AI, as well as our data storage, whether that's on-premise or in the cloud. So this is release 2. And as we carry these building blocks over, and let's go ahead and turn off filtering now, we're going to reuse what the team has already accomplished with release 1 and preparing for this program release, which may be multiple releases. So we've exported our building blocks from release 1. We're in our release 2 project file right now. It is a local file. It is not SQL. So I'm starting out in local for this demonstration, right? So what we're going to do is clone this package that we brought in, which contains the building blocks we're going to be focused on, right? So we're going to right click on this. We're going to go down to clone structure as new version. This pops up. It was a version 2 when we exported. I'm going to change the version 3. I'm going to say release 2. I'm going to hit OK. And it's going to ask me where I want to put this. And I want to put this in the solution approach document folder, right? The namespace. We're going to hit OK. And there we go. We're now down in solution approach. We go ahead and minimize this namespace here, which was discussions, where we keep our architecture catalog that we bring over from many different places. We brought this over from the project. You can bring it over from your asset repository. You can bring it over from RAS, which stands for Reusable Asset Services. Lots of ways. We'll demo that in this channel, right? So we are in solution approach, and we just brought in building blocks release 2. Let's take a look. So we have 2 diagrams. This one's says release 1. We're going to hit function key 2 and change the name. You learn all about this in the cloning, time-aware modeling video. I'll include a link. So let's take a look. Let's open it up. You can see we're in release 2. It's cloned, therefore it looks just like release 1. Let's go ahead and close this. So these elements are still in the original namespace. So let's just browse, right? So the diagram's there, but the elements, let's just pick cloud data and hit Alt G. And you can see we're in the R1 namespace, and here's all of the assets. So now as a solution architect, I have the building blocks to get started in release 2. These are all release 1 relevant building blocks. We're not going to do anything yet. This is current mode of operations. This is where we're going to start. But in order to get started on who's doing what, we need to bring in the current mode of operations, methods, and procedures. In other words, the requirements for doing business, right? So I've shown you lots of different ways of doing that. Let's go back to the main. Let's go to requirements management. And you can see business requirements blank. There's nothing in here. We brought over the relevant information we want to use, and we brought over the team that we want to use. So it populated our model view here, but we have no requirements yet, right? So we'll create a folder or reference links to the current mode of operations, methods and procedures, or requirements of doing business, because we're asking the team, all right, what are you basing these new requirements from? What's changing? Is it existing? Is it new? Are you enhancing the requirements for doing business, the way you're doing business? What is it? Don't skip this part. If the team in the first conference call or meeting is telling you, well, we came in with our requirements, we don't have that intelligence that you're looking for, make sure you get it immediately after that conference session, that requirements session. Now, to me, everything that the client has, regardless of where we are in the project, when I come in as a solution architect, everything is an assumption. You're assuming you're going to accomplish this. So one of the things that you want to do if you do not have all of the requirements, and you will not have them on day one, we're complete. No, you're not. You need to go through and ensure that you have all the requirements, and we'll do that as we get through simulation and all of that fun stuff, all right? So everyone in the team of stakeholders is to assume everything they want, right? So they just do an assumption drop. What is it that you want? They might not have a requirement for it. Well, I wanted it, but we didn't put it down as a requirement. We'll use that later to understand other things, all right? So like, for instance, you want to understand what the risks are versus the constraints versus the requirements for delivery versus remains just an assumption. So risk would be things like security. Constraints would be things like privacy regulation or other regulatory concerns. Constraints would also be things like privacy policies and access management. Requirements may be either business, function, or non-functional. So you have namespaces for each one of the types of requirements that you're going to be collecting over the start of the work effort and through the delivery. And then everything else will remain an assumption. And you want to make sure you have a repository or a parking lot where you're keeping your assumptions. Now, a cool thing in Sparx, and we're back over at the building block diagram for our solution approach for R2. So let's make sure that we're on that. We're going to right click because you don't want to start working on the wrong one. Make sure you lock it down, find in browser. So we're not on the right one, we're on R1. So let's go ahead and close this so we don't make any mistakes. We'll go ahead and close requirements right now. That's happening as we speak. And we're going to focus on R2 building blocks, all right? So let's right click again, find in browser, make sure we're in the right place, and there we are. And what we want to do is clone this diagram because we're going to look at something very cool. All right, so while we're on the diagram and we're in the namespace, we're going to go to design, and then we're going to go to the diagram panel. We're going to go to manage, and you'll see clone. Remember, we're in the diagram panel. So this is saying clone diagram as new version, all right? And it knows it's 03. We're going to leave it at 03 because we're just cloning the diagram. So let's hit OK, right? And then we're going to put it in the same namespace, building block release 2, as we have in this project instance. So let's hit OK. And here we go. But you'll notice that they're both named the same thing because you cloned the diagram, you cloned the name, right? So what we're going to do now is, well, which version do we want to use or reuse, right? So there's a couple of ways you can find out. Really doesn't matter because remember, it's a clone. It's a copy of the exact same thing, right? So we can double click in here and we can look at the date and time, and you can check your own clock to see whether, oh yeah, this is the one I just did. And then I'm going to double click again, and I'm going to call this release to responsibilities. All right. All right. Hopefully I typed that right because I'm a creative speller, right? So you can see this is the one that we're focused on, right? And this was the original building block, right? I'm going to close this and we're just on the responsibilities one, right? So what we're going to do here is we're going to double click in the diagram. We're going to go to diagram elements, and everything currently is turned off, right? We're not showing attributes, operation, tags, but what we want to show is requirements, right? And we're going to hit OK. Now you'll notice that each building block has requirements. We call these responsibilities in a block diagram like this. And we'll just go ahead, since we're working on cloud data, let's go ahead and open this one. We'll double click on it. And when it opens up, you'll see responsibilities, requirements, and then we have 4 requirements. And we keep them internal. We don't move them external. We can certainly start writing new requirements and then move those externally, but we want to keep these as responsibilities, all right? And there could be a lot more intelligence in here. This is for demonstration, so the descriptions are blank, all right? And then when we turn on requirements, we can see the responsibilities of each system that we're reviewing. And then remember, these elements are still, if I hit Alt-G, they're still in the original R1 source. We have not versioned any of these yet. We're in current mode of operations, and we're trying to understand, all right, what are the responsibilities of these systems from a CMO perspective, present mode perspective, right? So again, CMO, understand the existing architecture building blocks, what they're currently being used for, so that when you get into requirements, which is future mode, in other words, deliver and release 2, you understand, well, what's changing, and you can start the solution and the design from there. All right, we're going to start wrapping up here, but before we do that, what I want to do is I want to go back over to our asset repository, because in the next part, part 3, we're going to talk about reusing our asset repository. And I wanted to show you some changes that we have made in our asset repository, how I usually set up mine. And in other videos, we've talked about the asset repository itself. We've talked about the knowledge management repository in that session. I think we've talked about shared information data, or SID. We have a repository for that. It has all of our processes, architecture frameworks, shared intelligence frameworks, and things like that. I tend to bring these into the same SQL instance so that I can mine this data from various perspectives. And you may want to keep your architecture assets separate from your knowledge management assets, your methods and procedures, your policies, constraints, and so on. You may even want to break up your KMS repository or knowledge management system repository to lock down your security constraints and things like that. So we'll talk more about that. Probably not in this series. We'll get back to the asset management series and expand on that. But I wanted to show this as we move into the next part, reusing our asset repository. We showed how to create automated scripts to access the SQL database from other Sparx instances and even outside of Sparx. And as we're building out this data warehouse architecture, we're going to get into mining our delivery and process data for machine learning and visual analytics. Advanced analytics is what I wanted to say, but visually seeing what's going on in real time across all of your projects. And I even have a namespace specifically for projects, project links and everything like that. So to very quickly get to other projects where that data becomes extremely important to you. So I hope this video was helpful for you. I really look forward to getting into it. Part 3 again is going to be on reusing our asset repository. Part 4 is going to be using patterns to support our architecture delivery. Part 5 is going to be on building data solution approaches using scenarios. That's the one I can't wait to get to because a lot of you have been very interested in auto-generating various simulation diagrams, whether they're sequence, activity diagrams, state machine diagrams. That's going to be a real fun episode. Hopefully I can keep that short. And we're going to get into part 6, which is designing our data architecture. So really drilling down into the smaller, most important components of our data strategy. And then part 7, which is going to be near the end of the series, is going to be reporting and document management within our data strategy delivery. So until that next episode, happy modeling.